Imagine waking up to a world where most people no longer question anything, where noise, speed, and endless streams of information dull the mind until it becomes passive, where the human gift of curiosity and reflection is replaced by shallow reactions and echo chambers. This is not science fiction. It is the condition we live in today. Critical thinking, once the cornerstone of growth and freedom, is being replaced by what some call collective stupidity. Masses of people accept narratives without questioning, surrendering their independence of thought. They don't even realize it is happening. And yet, the consequences are profound. Carl Jung once warned, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. This avoidance has taken new form. We are conditioned to consume, not to reflect. We accept not because it is true but because it is easy. Philosopher Noam Chomsky described this decades ago as the manufacturing of consent. When media and systems of power flood us with narratives, and when we no longer question those narratives, control becomes effortless. The crowd believes not out of understanding but out of habit. And habit breeds obedience. Ask yourself, how often do you pause to verify what you hear? How often do you reflect before reacting? In a world obsessed with speed, reflection itself becomes rebellion. Consider how overwhelmed our minds have become. According to neuroscientist Daniel Levitin, the average person today processes 5 times more information per day than just a generation ago. Notifications, news, opinions, ads, all competing for attention. And when the brain is overloaded, it seeks shortcuts. It leans on bias, groupthink, and social proof. This is why a post with thousands of likes feels trustworthy, even if it is false. That is not reason speaking. It is a survival mechanism being exploited. And the more we surrender to it, the less we truly think. Nietzsche once observed, sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed. This is why critical thinking feels so dangerous today. It threatens illusions that comfort us. It slows down the machinery of outrage and conformity. It dares to ask, but is this really true? And in a culture addicted to certainty, that question is treated as rebellion. Our attention spans are collapsing. Marianne Wolf, a neuroscientist who studies reading, explains that digital skimming rewires the brain. We jump between tabs, skim headlines, and rarely dive deep. But deep thinking requires sustained attention. Without it, reflection disappears. Carl Sagan warned, we live in a society exquisitely dependent on science and technology, in which hardly anyone knows anything about science and technology. His fear was not only ignorance, but the loss of the ability to think critically about what we depend on most. And yet, critical thinking is not just under attack by technology or education. It is emotionally difficult. To think deeply is to admit that we do not know everything. It forces us into dissonance, where cherished beliefs collide with new evidence. It threatens the ego. And in a culture where identity and confidence are prized above truth, questioning becomes unbearable. So we retreat. We silence ourselves for fear of exclusion. We memorize slogans instead of ideas. We trade curiosity for certainty. Psychologist Eric Fromm saw this clearly in his book Escape from Freedom. He explained that many secretly prefer to surrender their freedom of thought, because freedom requires responsibility. And responsibility is frightening. It means no longer blaming others, no longer hiding in the crowd. This is why the decline of thinking is not just a technological accident, it is a social shift. People are choosing comfort over truth, distraction over depth, and conformity over independence. The cost is devastating. When thinking dies, questioning dies. And when questioning dies, freedom dies with it. Because a population that does not question becomes easy to deceive, easy to manage, and easy to control. So here is the question we must all face. Who benefits when people no longer think for themselves? And what happens to a society that chooses comfort over truth? When a child first enters the world, their natural state is curiosity. They touch, question, explore, and imagine without restraint. But very quickly, society moves to discipline that freedom. The first institutions that most of us enter, schools, rarely reward genuine thought. Instead, they reward memorization, obedience, and compliance. Carl Jung once wrote, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents." And in many ways, education becomes the transmission of those unlived lives. Teachers, parents, and systems impose not only knowledge, but expectations, how to behave, what to believe, what to value. The child learns less about discovering truth and more about fitting into pre-approved molds. Philosopher John Stuart Mill argued that genuine worth can only flourish in an atmosphere of freedom. Yet classrooms are designed not for freedom, but for efficiency. Uniform rules, standardized tests, and rigid hierarchies shape children into predictable units. This is not an accident. It is the design of a society that values order above originality. Consider the industrial roots of modern schooling. The factory model of education arose to produce workers, punctual, disciplined, and obedient. The bell replaced the clock, the test replaced dialogue, and the report card replaced self-reflection. Children became products, not thinkers. And the cost has been the slow erosion of independent thought. Nietzsche once warned, "In individuals insanity is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule." Education, when it suppresses individuality, prepares us not for wisdom but for conformity. The child who questions too much is labeled disruptive. The one who colors outside the lines is corrected. The one who doubts authority is punished. And so, the spark of curiosity dims, replaced by the dull glow of obedience. Carl Jung saw this process as a psychological wound. When children suppress parts of themselves to fit expectations, those parts do not vanish. They retreat into the unconscious, forming the shadow. Later in life, adults feel restless, anxious, or resentful without knowing why. They have lived the life expected of them, not the life true to them. Noam Chomsky described education as a system of indoctrination, one that teaches people not to think, but to obey. It produces citizens who can follow instructions, but rarely challenge structures of power. And when the crowd stops questioning, power consolidates with ease. The irony is that schools often claim to prepare children for the future. But what future are we preparing them for? A future of freedom or a future of managed obedience? When imagination is penalized and conformity is rewarded, we are not educating minds, we are manufacturing consent. This does not mean teachers are villains. Most enter education with genuine care. But they work within systems designed to minimize risk and maximize control. And control is the enemy of deep thought. Because thought requires wandering, doubting, and sometimes failing, all things schools are designed to suppress. Philosopher Bertrand Russell once said, "Men are born ignorant, not stupid. They are made stupid by education." What he meant was not that education itself is harmful, but that systems which prize conformity over creativity dull the mind. They take sharp curiosity and grind it down into uniform mediocrity. So we must ask, what happens to a society raised in such systems? We produce generations skilled at passing tests but unskilled at questioning authority. We raise children who fear mistakes more than they fear ignorance. We train people to seek approval instead of truth. And in doing so, we slowly strangle the very essence of freedom. Because freedom without thought is an illusion, and education without questioning is indoctrination. We live in an age where information flows faster than thought. News updates arrive by the second, opinions are broadcast instantly, and every device in our hands is a portal to 1,000 competing voices. At first glance, this seems like progress. We have more access to truth than any generation before us. But paradoxically, truth has never been harder to find. Carl Jung once observed, "People don't have ideas, ideas have people." In the age of mass media, this has become painfully true. We like to believe we are consuming information, but often it is information consuming us. We become vessels for slogans, hashtags, and headlines, repeating what we've absorbed without reflection. Noam Chomsky described this as manufacturing consent. When media corporations decide what is amplified, what is ignored, and what is repeated until it feels familiar, they shape not only opinion but reality itself. We accept not because something is true but because it is repeated. Repetition becomes belief, and belief becomes obedience. Nietzsche once warned, "Sometimes people don't want to hear the truth because they don't want their illusions destroyed." But today, illusions are not just personal, they are industrial. Entire systems are designed to feed us comforting half-truths, tailored to our desires, fears, and prejudices. Algorithms ensure we see only what reinforces what we already believe. And when every feed is personalized, truth itself becomes fragmented. Consider how the brain reacts to information overload. Neuroscientists explain that when faced with too much data, the mind relies on shortcuts, emotions, biases, and group consensus. A headline with 10,000 shares feels trustworthy, even if it is false. An angry voice feels convincing, even if it is hollow. Truth is drowned not by lies alone, but by sheer volume. Carl Sagan once lamented, "We live in a society exquisitely dependent on science and technology, in which hardly anyone knows anything about science and technology." The danger is not ignorance alone, it is misplaced trust. We trust the loudest voice, the most polished production, the most repeated claim. And when trust is misplaced, manipulation thrives. Jung believed that what we refuse to confront in ourselves, we project outward. Media exploits this psychological law by feeding us stories that mirror our inner fears. If you fear chaos, you will be fed stories of danger. If you crave control, you will be fed stories of order. If you feel powerless, you will be fed stories of villains to blame. The feed becomes a mirror, and the more we stare into it, the less we see clearly. The result is not enlightenment but division. Each group convinced it holds the truth, each group blind to the fact that its truth was curated for it. Polarization is not an accident, it is a business model. And the more divided we are, the easier we are to control. So what can we do? The first step is awareness. Stop assuming that more information equals more truth. Recognize that every channel, every platform, every headline has an agenda. The second step is slowing down. Truth cannot be absorbed at the speed of a scroll. It requires reflection, patience, and the willingness to sit with discomfort. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." This wisdom is more urgent than ever. We must treat information not as fact to be swallowed, but as material to be examined. We must ask not only, "Is this true?" but also, "Who benefits if I believe this?" The media will never stop trying to shape perception. It is its nature. But the mind that pauses, questions, and reflects can no longer be shaped so easily. And that pause, that act of reclaiming thought in a world of noise, is itself a form of rebellion. Human beings are tribal by nature. We long to belong, to be accepted, to feel part of something greater than ourselves. This instinct once kept us alive, but in the modern world, it has become one of the greatest threats to independent thought. Carl Jung warned, the larger the crowd, the more negligible the individual. In groups, people surrender pieces of themselves in exchange for belonging. The stronger the group identity, the weaker the personal one becomes. And soon a person is no longer thinking as I, but only as we. Nietzsche once observed, in individuals insanity is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs it is the rule. History confirms this again and again. Crowds justify violence, excuse injustice, and silence dissent, all in the name of unity. What no single person would dare to do, a group can normalize in an instant. Consider how identity is shaped today. Instead of building from within, many adopt ready-made labels offered by politics, culture, or ideology. Once labeled, every thought, every choice, every belief must align with the group. To question the group is to risk exile. And exile for many feels worse than ignorance. Social media amplifies this dynamic. The platforms reward outrage, conformity, and slogans over nuance. Belonging is measured in likes, shares, and hashtags. The cost of independence is silence, or worse, cancellation. And so, countless people retreat from honesty into performance. Carl Jung believed that what is not made conscious becomes fate. When individuals fail to confront their own identity, they outsource it to the collective. They become shadows of themselves, defined not by inner truth but by external allegiance. The crowd offers comfort, but at the price of authenticity. Philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once said, "The crowd is untruth." He meant that truth is always found in the individual, never in the masses. But to claim individuality requires courage. The courage to stand apart, to risk being misunderstood, to carry the loneliness of authenticity. Look at how groups handle dissent. The dissenter is not debated but shamed. Not reasoned with but excluded. The fear of exclusion silences many before they even speak. And thus the group sustains itself, not through truth but through fear. The tragedy is that most people never notice the trade they've made. They believe they are free, but their freedom is conditional on not questioning the tribe. They feel strong in numbers, but the strength is borrowed, not their own. And when the group collapses, they are left hollow, unsure of who they truly are. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know the truth." It does not matter how loud the crowd shouts if it shouts lies. It does not matter how many follow if they follow blindly. Truth is never guaranteed by numbers. So what does it mean to resist the weight of the crowd? It means building an identity not on borrowed slogans, but on lived experience. It means being willing to stand alone when necessary. It means valuing truth over comfort and authenticity over acceptance. The need to belong will always whisper. But if belonging costs you your mind, it is not belonging, it is captivity. And only when you step beyond the crowd can you begin to discover the strength of being fully yourself. Freedom is a word repeated so often that its meaning has begun to fade. For some, freedom is the ability to do whatever they want. For others, it is protection from control or oppression. But the deepest kind of freedom is not political or social. It is psychological. It is the ability to think for yourself in a world determined to think for you. Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This privilege cannot be given by governments, crowds, or systems. It is earned through the courage to confront your own mind, to refuse illusions, and to live in alignment with truth, even when truth is uncomfortable. Nietzsche once said, "No price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." That is the essence of true freedom. It is not the absence of constraints, but the presence of integrity. It is living as your own authority, not as a puppet of culture, ideology, or fear. The greatest threat to this freedom is not tyranny from above, but conformity from within. When we silence ourselves for approval, when we trade reflection for slogans, when we let groups think in our place, we surrender our independence voluntarily. And the tragedy is that most never notice what they have lost. Eric Fromm warned in Escape from Freedom that many people secretly fear freedom because it carries responsibility. To think for yourself means you cannot blame the crowd when you are wrong. You cannot outsource your choices to tradition, authority, or ideology. You must carry the weight of your own decisions. And many would rather remain children of the collective than adults of the self. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. The true battlefield is always internal. The world will try to distract you, seduce you, and pressure you into obedience. But the only lasting freedom is the strength to govern your own mind, to hold your thoughts steady while the crowd shifts wildly around you." So how do we claim this freedom? First, by slowing down. A mind addicted to speed cannot think deeply. Reflection requires time, silence, and the patience to let discomfort surface. Second, by questioning relentlessly. Do not accept headlines as truth, traditions as sacred, or group consensus as reality. Ask, who benefits if I believe this? What evidence supports this, and what evidence challenges it? Truth is not fragile. It survives questioning. Third, by building the courage to stand alone. Authenticity often requires exile. You will be misunderstood, criticized, even rejected. But solitude with integrity is always stronger than belonging without it. Carl Jung reminded us, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. Freedom requires this inner work. If you cannot face your own shadow, you will always fear the shadows cast by others. But when you accept yourself fully, the world loses its power to manipulate you through fear. True freedom is not easy. It demands honesty in the face of illusion, courage in the face of pressure, and integrity in the face of compromise. But it is also the only freedom that cannot be taken away. Governments can limit rights. Groups can demand obedience. Circumstances can restrict movement. But no one can chain a mind that dares to think. No one can silence the inner voice that chooses truth over comfort. And no one can erase the strength of a person who owns themselves completely. So remember this. Freedom is not a gift you wait for. It is a discipline you practice. It is not found in comfort, but in courage. Not in belonging, but in authenticity. And when you choose to think, to question, and to live as your truest self, you carry within you the only freedom that lasts.